I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Grateful all generations, oh what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they wanna understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations, oh what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, once again, welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program in partnership with the Washington Examiner. So great to be with you today. If you're just joining us on YouTube, welcome. For those on Facebook, I'm kind of going to repeat a little bit of what we did before because of these technical snafus that were going on. You know, sometimes this kind of thing, it happens. But it's good to be here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense, day in and day out, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. Thanks for joining us. So I want to talk for a moment about the value of a handshake, because Dr. Fauci said this when he was on the Wall Street Journal podcast. I don't think we should ever shake hands ever again, to be honest with you. Not only would it be good to prevent coronavirus disease, it probably would decrease instances of influenza dramatically in the country. Now, yesterday he was asked on a couple of different shows what his thoughts were exactly on the handshake and whether or not he thinks it should go away, even after this crisis has abated. And right now, it's illegal in Colorado, where I'm broadcasting from, for people to shake hands. So let's play this clip, cut 6, of Dr. Fauci looking out into the future, not just during the coronavirus pandemic, but out into the future.
No, I did it almost a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not really. There was a bit of reality to that. What I really meant is that we really now need to be aware of, because it has hit us smack in the face, that respiratory infections, particularly brand new, ominous respiratory infections like we're going through right now, are clearly spread very much not only by droplets, but by people touching their face, shaking hands, and that's the reason why we talk about washing hands so often. I don't think in reality that we're going to all of a sudden never again shake hands. But I think I threw that out there to get people to start thinking much more about personal hygiene and the way that impacts the spread of a really deadly infection like we're going through right now.
So I can't blame an infectious disease doctor who's overseeing a pandemic and has overseen other epidemics and U.S. responses thereof for saying, hey, I think we should get rid of the handshake. Now, thankfully, he sort of backpedaled a little bit and said, well, I don't think we'll really get rid of it, but it would be a good idea. At the very least, we can go ahead and make sure to wash our hands regularly. Now, that's good. And I say this because I agree with him that hopefully this will be a lesson about personal hygiene. But at the same time as this is a lesson about personal hygiene, we cannot allow it to be one that says, change our culture fundamentally. Because look, my dad taught me how to do a handshake when I was a kid. You want to be firm. You want to look the other person in the eye. Ideally, get the upper hand. Nice, strong grip. Shake a few times. Don't go overboard. Don't be doing this kind of thing. Don't have a fish where you're not grabbing firm at all. And then when I started getting involved in politics in Colorado at the ripe old age of 13, I started putting those lessons to use and found the value of a handshake. You look somebody in the eye, and you can tell, usually, if they're sincere. You can tell if they are somebody you want to do business with, you want to relate to, you want to connect with. And that's important in a society. It is a significant way for us to judge social interaction and professional interactions. Research shows that if you show up at a job interview and your handshake is good, you're more likely to get the job than if your handshake is a fish. It's a way to judge somebody's character, a way to judge how they are as a person, a way to judge how they might be if they work for you. And so when President Trump, in the past couple of weeks, has floated the idea, hey, maybe we should get rid of handshakes, I started responding to it on my Saturday Denver talk show on the radio, 710 KNUS, and on Sunday in a column I wrote for Colorado Politics, a Colorado publication where I'm a columnist. And lo and behold, a couple days later, Dr. Fauci would stir up a firestorm of conversation over the handshake. Thankfully, he did his clarification. I think this needs to be a lesson that we have better hygiene, that we wash our hands, that we have hand sanitizer, and we use it a lot more regularly than it seems we have been. And I say that because of the fact that people have just been at the stores buying up all the soap and all the hand sanitizer suddenly as though they just found religion. It's a brand new thing to them. Oh, I need to get some. Different places of business running out of soap more quickly and so forth. People finally and rightly taking up upon themselves to wash their hands. Oh my goodness, wash their hands after going to the restroom. That's the lesson here. Fauci's exactly right. We need to take this as a lesson for the rest of our lives that personal hygiene, including hand washing, is essential in order to prevent the spread of disease and just be like we should as people. But to get rid of the handshake that is so significant to our culture, and it goes back millennia. I mean, I talk in my column about how in the 9th century BC, Assyrian king Shalmaneser, something like that, the third, shook hands with the Babylonian ruler to affirm an alliance. In his Iliad and Odyssey, the ancient Greek poet Homer used handshakes to reflect oaths and trust. And then in the 17th century, the Quakers looked at him and said, this is more egalitarian than a bow or than a tip of the hat. Good on the Quakers for setting a trend where it used to be, let's seal a deal. And now it's not just seal a deal, but it's a greeting. Hello, goodbye. And a way to ferment relationships with somebody on a professional or a personal level. So I'm a big fan of the handshake, glad and grateful for Dad's handshake lessons, and I think we need to bring it back after this crisis has abated. Now, coming up today on the show in just a matter of moments, we will be joined by none other than Phil van Doorn, who is MarketWatch investing columnist and analyst. We'll also be joined by Ken Montera, former executive vice president of L Brands, to talk about what's going on in retail in that space. Very significant changes, seismic, tectonic shifts happening in the retail space. And also, we will be joined by Roshini Rajkumar, strategic communications strategist and crisis messaging expert, who will join us here on the show to offer her thoughts on the handshake as well as how the Trump administration is handling the crisis presentation, getting the message out, and more. So lots coming up on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. And you do not want to miss this. If you didn't see it yesterday, did you know that the Easter Bunny and President Trump actually had a meeting recently? We've got the video. Stay tuned, Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Who's there? What do you want?
Hello, Don Trump. It's me, the Easter Bunny.
Have a seat, have a seat, have a seat so much. Do you remember, Easter Bunny, when I did you a huge favor by eliminating those horrible carrot tariffs?
Yeah,
Well, now guess what? You're going to do me a huge favor by doing your normal Easter Bunny thing, whatever that is. Running around the world, planting eggs in the ground. But America first, please.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, I hop around the world. I don't run. And second of all, I don't plant the eggs. I just hide them.
How do they come to full maturity then?
Well, you hard boil them.
That seems a little cruel to me. I don't, you know.
Well, I'll tell you what you can do. Why don't you just pardon them like you do the Thanksgiving turkeys?
It's a different thing.
The third thing. How am I going to get around the world, Mr. President? The travel ban's in effect. There's TSA to worry about. I mean, I got to get...
Consider it done. Consider it done. I'm going to use the War Appropriations Act to commandeer Santa's sleigh.
Good idea.
And there's nothing he can do about it.
Well, he might not...
Oh, you're worried about his elves.
The elves, yeah.
Believe me, if they raise a stink, it's going to be boom, boom, out go their northern lights, believe me.
Oh, that seems kind of harsh.
Now, tell me something. When you hippity-hop out of your tomb...
That would be Jesus.
Every year, and you see your shadow?
That would be Puxatawny Phil, the gopher.
That means there's 6 more weeks of the quarantine, isn't that right?
That would be Dr. Fauci.
You know something very interesting? The Easter Bunny. Most bunnies leave only white eggs.
There's only me, sir.
And that's wrong. I'm the least egg-cis man you'll ever meet. This year we're going to have all the colors of the eggs everywhere, every stripe. A panoply, a panorama, a rainbow. A rainbow of colors.
Yeah.
I want it to look like Walt Disney himself threw up.
Thanks for that visual. I think I can make that happen. Let me call my peeps. We'll get around the world before you know it, and Easter Sunday's going to be great again. Oh, and this year, Mr. President,
yes,
just as a favor, I promise not to smoke all the Easter grass.
That's a very good.
That's a little joke I got from Colorado.
I'm going to tweet that one, actually.
I'm out of here.
I'm tweeting it right now. Here I am. Oh, by the way, when you get to heaven, say hi to Half and the bunnies for me, please.
I really don't think that's the way it works, Don Trump, but I'll see what I can do.
Hi, Tom. Gee, you look terrible.
I feel terrible. Achy, fevery, nauseous.
Ooh, that's too bad. You know, you ought to...
Chills, stuffiness, bloating.
Yeah, you know...
Scratchy, gassy, drippy.
I know! Say, Tom, you should try Wear-a-Flu.
Wear-a-Flu?
Wear-a-Flu is the only medication that actually takes your flu symptoms and hides them at various places inside your body so that by the time your body finds them all, your flu is gone. In the meantime, you're back to work.
You were right, Ed. Wear-a-Flu lets me ignore my flu symptoms and gets me back to work. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for coming in and infecting the rest of the office.
Come out wherever you are with Wear-a-Flu. Take as directed.
Hey, this is Frankie.
Hey, and I'm Angelo. We're the owners of F&A Pizzeria. If you're looking for the best pizza in town, remember us, F&A.
Hey, we got the best crust.
F&A.
We got the best cheese.
F&A.
We got the best sauce.
F&A, man.
Put it all together, what do you got?
F&A.
Yeah, you got that right. F&A.
F&A Pizza on the corner of Hell Yeah Avenue and Dan Straight Street.
And now, fans, let's welcome back, standing at the Crossroads, or should I say, sitting on the set at the Crossroads, Mr. Jimmy Sengenberger.
One and all, welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, the one show that on a Friday when you're feeling good, will just bring out an E-flat harmonica and play a little bit, while brother Phil van Doorn is on the line. Welcome back once again, Jimmy at the Crossroads, in partnership with the Washington Examiner. I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Great to be with you. And yes, indeed, we are joined by investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch. Once again, Phil van Doorn here on the show. Phil, how are you this Friday?
Everything's okay here. How are you, Big Jim?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. I thought I'd play a little harp for you again.
Yeah, it sounded great, as always.
So how are things with you and your family, my friend?
A little cabin fever here. My son has had a good couple of weeks of school. That has gone pretty well. But generally, it's a little boring. We can't really go out much. We could do some hiking in the woods where we don't see any people. Other than that, I've been pretty much focused on work.
Well, and there's certainly much to talk about. I mean, the markets have been topsy-turvy, but this week has been a bit better of a week. What do you make of what we've been seeing over the past several days, Phil?
Well, I'll tell you what's foremost on my mind this morning is it occurs to me that a lot of people don't understand how much help is available to them. And I guess we could get to that in a moment. As far as the market goes, if we look at the S&P 500 from the closing record on March 19th through the close on March 23rd, we were down close to 35%. Now we're down around 18%. So it's been, our decline has been cut in half. So some people might be feeling complacent, but the second quarter has only just started, and it's going to be such a terrible quarter, and we're not going to see most of the economic figures until July. So we cannot be certain that we've hit a bottom for the market. And in previous bear markets, we have bounced around in similar ways. So please do not be surprised to see the market plunge from here before it bottoms and before people start to go back to work and the economy begins a long recovery.
Now, Phil, do you think, I'm looking out at second quarter. We're in the second quarter now, but second quarter earnings season, or when that comes about later, and we get that data. That's not going to be very good. Could we be in at that point in time for another world of hurt when you actually see how these companies perform in second quarter?
And it's not about corporate earnings. I don't think anybody really cares what the earnings numbers say this quarter.
Can I just clarify what I mean by the earnings report is not so much how the earnings are coming in, but what it shows underneath the numbers about how these companies are performing and how they will perform going out into the future.
We won't even have a properly calculated unemployment number a month from now. Mm-hmm. The number that we got for March was 2 weeks out of date. The number that we get early in May will also be outdated. So, we're easily over 10% unemployment already, and there's no reason to think it won't be much, much higher because it's so difficult to apply right now through the various state agencies because of their epic inefficiency. So I'm worried about the economic figures. They are going to be very, very bad for the second quarter, and there's no reason for that not to drive another leg down for stocks. All that said, of course I'm hopeful because what we're getting is an unbelievable amount of support from the federal government and the Federal Reserve. But the direct support can take a while to receive, and the indirect support is filtered through the banks, through the Small Business Administration, through various programs, which means red tape. So the help is there, and the slow distribution of the money is one problem. And another problem is a lot of people don't even know what they are eligible for. So I have to direct you to what we have this week. Just today, our financial services team at MarketWatch put up a very detailed guide. And here's the headline. It's a long one. The best and worst ways to get cash if you've been affected by the coronavirus pandemic. It details everything from soup to nuts. I'll give you an example. I spoke to a self-employed friend today in New York. He's been helping his IT clients remotely. And he said most of his clients cannot afford to pay him. So he's helping them anyway, but he did not know he was eligible for unemployment benefits. Under the CARES Act, he's eligible for half of the state unemployment benefits, plus the extra $600 a week that the federal government has thrown in. So this is very, very important to a lot of people, and I think the word needs to get out. I think some people don't realize that they're getting some coverage. So that's what I'm worried about this morning. So I have a piece called Weekend Reads, which is a summary of what we had for the week. We have a guide for not only the aid that you can get, but mortgage assistance, forbearance, meaning
I want to jump through all of those piece by piece because you just threw a whole bunch at us, Phil van Doorn, our guest from MarketWatch, and so I want to break it down. And actually, I was just about to get to your article on Weekend Reads anyway, so let me help take it piece by piece. You mentioned the mortgage assistance. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there. Obviously, there are people across the country who are not able to afford their mortgage now because they're out of money.
you have to pick up the phone and call your mortgage loan servicer. You may not have ever done so before. Typically, when you get a mortgage loan, if it's a fixed rate loan, as most of them are, the bank immediately sells it. It probably sold the loan to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And of course, you may not have even gone to a bank in the first place. So your loan is being serviced by somebody, either a bank or a non-bank servicer is collecting your payment each month and sending that payment to Fannie and Freddie, who ultimately send it to the investors who bought the paper. You got to call your loan servicer because under the CARES Act, you can take a year off from making payments on your mortgage loan. Now, obviously, I'm oversimplifying it. You have to make that phone call, and some of them have set up online programs where it's easier to put in the forbearance application than it is to call someone. The word is forbearance. In this case, it means you don't pay for a whole year. And that can help a heck of a lot of people with unemployment exploding. So we have an article about that. Let's get the headline and just take a moment as I open it up. It says, are you a homeowner seeking forbearance on your mortgage? Watch out for these red flags. So that's by Jacob Passy. And again, it's a fully detailed guide on how to get the mortgage assistance that I bet a lot of people don't realize that they're qualified for.
Yeah, no, I think it's such a great point, and I'm glad that there's opportunities out there like at MarketWatch to check out the details and delve in. Now, then also there are tax relief measures. Of course, there's also delay in tax filings, or at least paying your taxes, deferring those payments for companies and for individuals. Phil van Doorn, our guest from MarketWatch, tell us a little bit about the tax breaks component of your story.
I knew that payments due April 15th were pushed back to July 15th, but not until this morning did I realize that you don't have to file until July 15th.
Oh, I thought it was just the one, not the other as well. Okay.
Yeah, so I was wrong, and I don't know when that change took place, but got another long headline. It's by Bill Bischoff. It's spelled Bischoff. The headline is, the most important COVID-19 related federal tax relief measures. There are all sorts of things there for all sorts of circumstances, including small business. So please check that out as well. Again, the easiest way to do it, and to toot my own horn, is to search for MarketWatch Weekend Reads, because that sums it all up. Yeah, and frankly, I'm really concerned about this because my own ignorance points to that of others who need the help a lot more than I do.
No, I think that's so true, and you need an all-in-one place to do it, so good on you here. Now, how about auto insurers? This is something I was reading about, that auto insurers are actually giving refunds to their customers in some cases. In fact, I saw an article elsewhere that was talking about millions of dollars worth being refunded in certain circumstances, depending on what they are, but what's going on with auto insurers?
Remember, Jimmy, remember, once you have their money, never give it back. Yes. What I saw was credits. So if you get a discount, it's probably going to be credited toward your next premium.
Sure.
I don't know if any cash is available. I doubt it.
Right. See, Phil, you always are great at clarifying the facts. I appreciate it. That's for darn sure. What's one other component of your article to highlight? And then I got a few other things I want to dive into with you.
Well, here's another one, cabin fever. Younger couples where one or both tend to be out of the house all day are probably filled with joy at the end of the working day when they get together. But when they're stuck together 24/7, especially if there are children who need to be educated, certain new pressures may build. So we have an article written by a Harvard psychologist who points to the behavior of older retired couples who tend to support and help each other. They tend to have far fewer fights than the younger couples, so it's a worthy read.
Again, Phil van Doorn joining us, investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch. Phil, let's talk a little bit about the banking sector right now and how we can expect their earnings to come in, but particularly how they're doing as a sector of the economy at this point in time. I mean, we've got all these small business loans under the CARES Act that various banks are able to participate in giving out those loans. The funds for this Paycheck Protection Program has essentially been exhausted or is on the verge of exhaustion. We're talking about that with the guest yesterday, but there are other loan programs out there for corporations and so forth. So how are these companies doing financially amidst all of this?
It's too early to point to any problems with the banks. The banks have much more capital than they did heading into the 2008 crisis. Then again, the banks spent billions of dollars on stock buybacks over the past few years. Money that it would have been really nice to have right now because it could have been leveraged to make more loans, which are needed, and it would have made the banks stronger. But all that being said, this is the part of the cycle where the banks have to set aside reserves for expected loan losses. That means earnings are cut in half at least. However, since we know the storm is coming, a lot of those additions to loan loss reserves will take place in the second quarter. So you should expect to see some big losses for the banks when second quarter earnings season begins next week. I don't know how quickly they will set aside reserves, because the worst pain for the bank tends to happen about 6 months after unemployment hits its peak, and we're not there yet. So conventional wisdom is banks will face their biggest loan losses in the first quarter of 2021. So anyway, the banks have to make their big adjustment. At the same time, you have an incredible amount of money, banks stopping new loan efforts by the banks. But this is really only going to benefit small businesses that already have a banking relationship. Most of them do. Most of them have a commercial loan officer that they can call and discuss their problems with, even during the good times. And that lender should know their business pretty well. And the best ones are even acting as consultants and will even reach out to the small businesses that need help right now. So it's all about the personal relationship between the small business person and their bank representative. That's the problem.
Yeah.
We're trying to help everybody from the top down, but it has to be filtered through the banks with aid from the government and the Federal Reserve. So it's very complicated, but the help is there. So everyone has to call their bankers.
Phil van Doorn, again, our guest from MarketWatch. Here's something as we wrap up our conversation that I always like to highlight with you. It seems that a lot of investors in the past number of weeks have been trading or making decisions more on headlines, or at least the market has followed the headlines a good bit. When we've had good news about the coronavirus pandemic and the handling of it, markets often have been going up. But when we see bad news coming out, then the markets seem to be declining. Talk to us again about headlines and investing based on headlines at this moment especially, and the long-term trajectory of the stock market in history.
Jimmy, what you're saying is very thoughtful and important, and I hope people are listening, because people are so reactive to the headlines that I will not even publish a story that's positive about stocks in any way unless the market is up that day. And that goes back before the crisis. People will not read a story about quality stocks to consider buying unless the market is up that day. So that shows you that the financial media is not the only ridiculous part of the equation. The readers are as well. And with that said, you can't react to the headlines. If you sell into a declining market, you're guaranteed to lose a lot of money. If you can't sit through a major decline in the stock market, a cyclical decline, you shouldn't be invested in stocks. You should be invested in income-producing securities so that money's coming in every month and so that you can sleep better at night. As it is now, if you're blessed to remain employed, and you're contributing to a tax-deferred retirement account, and that's invested in a broad stock fund, just stick with it. You're paying lower prices when the stock market is down. You have hopefully decades to go until you retire, and you will ride through the cycle. If those aren't your circumstances, you have a serious problem.
Phil van Doorn has been our guest this segment for MarketWatch. We got to let you go, but I hope you have a great weekend. It is always so great to talk with you and really get a dose of markets reality, especially with the headlines. I mean, we're talking on this program where politics and economics collide, and the market is a prime example of that, especially when investors are responding to political headlines and medical headlines and so forth right now. So we got to cut right through it. Appreciate you joining us. As always, my best to you and your family, and have a great weekend, Phil.
You too, Jim. All the best. Hope everyone's safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
You as well. Once again, Phil van Doorn joining us from MarketWatch, investing columnist and analyst. We're going to take a break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about the economy, particularly retail, and how the retail space is handling what's going on with coronavirus, what they should keep in mind, what we should keep in mind about the future of retail once we get out of this current crisis of the pandemic. We will talk with Ken Montera, former Executive Vice President of L Brands, when we continue here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Stay with us.
Crikey, that was the biggest bloody mosquito I've ever seen. Wait, coming in. Oh, good day, mate. You know, after a long day of kangarangling and croc roping, a man can really work up an appetite. Not to mention a whopper of a backache. I know a place, and that's why I like coming into the Back Out Steakhouse. The Back Out is the only place I know where you can sit down in a lumbar support Barca lounger and enjoy a big juicy bandicoot steak or a thick koala chop served by a licensed chiropractor. And as you partake of your meal, your server will provide you with a spinal manipulation, neck twist, the hip alignment, the full Matilda. One visit to the Back Out Steakhouse, and your spirits will return like an Abbo's boomerang. So the next time your back goes on walkabout, and you're coincidentally, simultaneously craving a slab of cooked meat, waltz on into the Back Out Steakhouse. You not only feel good down under, but all over. Back Out Steakhouse! Good stuff, eh, Skippy? Bloody boomerangs. Back Out Steakhouse!
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hello, Jimmy. This is President Ronald Reagan, calling from the great beyond on your hotline. It's a different number than the one I used to contact Mr. Gorbachev, but it's no less important, especially at this kind of time. Well, Nancy and I, we stay on the ranch now here in heaven, and we're your biggest fans. We sit out on the porch there, and I'll have my Nancy, bless her heart, she makes me some tea, and we listen to your show, every minute of it. We fully support you in what you're about to accomplish in the future. Nothing but peaceful progress. Some people say, well, what will Jimmy do now? Well, stand by, because you're going to see some real fireworks. This young man has so many great ideas, and so forth. Why, I hate to interrupt, Ronnie, but let me just say this about that. I couldn't agree more with the way that you and Nancy feel about this entire thing. Jackie and I have been observing and listening to the Sengenberger show, and with regards to that, he's on the edge of a new frontier. No looking back, and I declare that by the time this decade is out, he'll have a syndicated show that will spread all the way across the universe. Oh, well, Jimmy, that was Jack Kennedy. He likes to get every word in edgewise. I tease him a lot. He likes to go out on my boat there and tool around on the sailboat. Well, Nancy brings him lemonade. He enjoys it. Yes, we're both, all of us are big fans. Oh, well, Jimmy, it seems that Nancy's ringing that old chuck wagon dinner bell, and it's time to go get all the fixins'. Coming, Mother. So, we'd just like to say congratulations. Well done. In closing, I'd like to say that if you ever run into an obstacle that seems too big or too daunting, well, I'll say this. Mr. Sengenberger, tear down that wall.
Ladies and gentlemen, your host of Jimmy at the Crossroads, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Welcome back, Jimmy at the Crossroads. I am indeed the aforementioned Jimmy Sengenberger, joining you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush magic as producer once again. Today, so good to be with you on a Friday as the jazz music plays. Nice sax going on there. Good to be with you. By the way, I didn't say this earlier. I need to remind you that you can connect with the show on Twitter. Tweet at me at SangCenter. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. You can also log on to my website, jimmysengenberger.com, and go to the contact page right there. Remember, there's no A, there's no I, there's no U in Sengenberger. It's all E's all the time. Once you know that, Sengenberger is easy. And so be sure to check it out and contact me there. It's an interesting story, Washington Examiner, our partners, of course, by Mike Brest, and he's reporting about Dr. Anthony Fauci, who of course is a leading member of the coronavirus task force for the Trump administration, acknowledging that the administration is actually considering the idea of distributing certificates of immunity to the virus. This is something. Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, made the revelation during a Friday morning interview on CNN's New Day. You know that's possible, Fauci said when asked if he could imagine a time when people would carry such forms of identification. It's one of those things that we talk about when we want to make sure that we know who the vulnerable people are and not, he explained. That is something that's being discussed. I think it might actually have some merit under certain circumstances. Now, I get deeply concerned when we have somebody like a Dr. Fauci, a bureaucrat in a presidential administration, even when we're talking about an expert like Dr. Fauci, who many Americans trust, the idea of the government talking about certificates of immunity or antibody certificates, potentially. That is to say, something that demonstrates that you have had coronavirus. That is deeply, deeply troubling to me from a sort of civil libertarian perspective. The idea that the all-knowing, all-powerful federal government or the state governments would actually provide this type of certification. That means that very specific information needs to be provided to the government, and it sets up a system and an infrastructure in order to make this all happen. And I think that is rather striking when we consider everything, all the different facets of what's happening today in our lives with regards to the government. More and more privacy violations, privacy being taken away, more and more difficult when it comes to being able to live our lives without the intrusion of government, without violations of our privacy. And while I understand the whole circumstance of Dr. Fauci saying this is good, that he might do this, it really is stunning when you think about it. Now, again, Fauci is an expert and trying to say, hey, we need to figure out ways in which to reopen the economy, but let's be clear about something too. The data is now no longer supporting a massive sort of shutdown. We are seeing significant reductions in projections as data have come in. State by state by state. Some states now 70% less than the projections. We were talking about as many as 400,000 Americans infected. Now we're talking, rather not infected, killed. Now we're talking 60,000 and so forth. I mean, these are stunning numbers no matter what when you get to the 5 digits. But at the same time, they're not meeting the numbers that we were originally told. And the idea then that the government should float ideas like, let's violate people's privacy, provide them with these kinds of certificates of immunity or certificates of antibodies that prove that you already had the virus in order for you to go back out there, seems intrusive to me and is not supported by the data where the models are increasingly being adjusted downward in order to accommodate real data that's actually come in. Dr. Fauci, let's play this clip here. We've got Dr. Fauci in cut 4 talking about projections and the models and how they've been bearing out.
You know, the models, as I've often said, are as good as the assumptions that you put into the models. And those assumptions, sometimes when you tweak them a little, they really change the range of the kinds of projections that you've heard. Remember, we were talking about 100,000 to 200,000 deaths. What's happening is that we are doing a very good job on mitigation, on the physical separation, the adherence to the guidelines. And as new data comes in, what you do, you integrate that data into the model to modify the model. And that's why you're seeing those projections coming down somewhat. That's good news, but the thing we have to be careful of that we don't then take that good news to think that we might be able to pull back a bit. We've got to continue, in many respects, to redouble our efforts at the mitigation of physical separation in order to keep those numbers down and hopefully even get them lower than what you've heard recently.
So fair enough. Social distancing seems to be helping. Perhaps also the projections from the models were much higher than they should have been originally, but the data does not support these kinds of intrusive measures. Or the last couple of days we've been talking about Zeke Emanuel and what he said on MSNBC when he pointed out that this could go on for 18 months, we've got to prepare for it. It's absolutely nonsensical. So the data not supporting these kinds of draconian policies to go on for months on end, and certainly not the idea of certificates of immunity. Okay, so let's get back to the economic side of things. We're seeing a major tectonic shift in retail right now where stores are not open unless you are a grocery store, you provide services and products to businesses and so forth. But by and large, regular everyday retail operations, such as companies like Bath & Body Works and others, are not open, not allowed to be open because of the way in which we're trying to address this coronavirus pandemic. I wanted to dive into this a little bit with someone who really understands retail because he was involved in retail at high-level positions for quite some time. Ken Montera is former Executive Vice President of Retail Operations at L Brands, Chief Stores Officer at L Brands, also former Executive Vice President or Executive VP of National Sales at Bath & Body Works, and in addition was a VP, General Manager for PepsiCo. And he joins us now here on Jimmy at the Crossroads to dive into what's happening for retail and how this may result in changes long-term for the retail space. Papa Ken, we'll talk about why I'm calling you that in a little bit, but welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads. Good to talk with you, my friend.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good to be here. Congratulations on your new format.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good to have you here. So let me jump right in and ask first how you are doing amidst everything and how you think the retail sector is doing amidst everything with this pandemic, especially as now people are turning to online and they're not going to stores. People are out of work. My mother now, she works at White House Black Market. She used to work at Bath & Body Works, as you know, for over 20 years, and she's not been working because of this pandemic, not going to the store. But what say you on how you're doing and how retail's doing?
Yeah, well, thank you. We're doing well personally. My wife and I are doing really well. The family's doing well. We've had one somewhat casualty. My daughter's a merchant in retail, and she was laid off about 2 weeks ago. So it is impacting retail in a tremendous way, and it's getting pretty close to home. But everybody is healthy and safe, and we hope to weather through this and get back to work as quickly as possible.
As for the industry?
Well, I think the industry is getting shattered right now. You really have to understand the impact of retail on the American economy. There's over 16 million people employed in retail. That means 1 out of every 10 jobs in the United States are retail related. And that's done through 1 million establishments, either corporately owned or privately owned. So that contributes over $1.2 trillion to our GDP, or 6%. In 2017, a little known fact was the top 2 occupations in America were clerks and cashiers. And 1/3 of all first-time jobs are held at a retail level. So the impact that's having on bricks and mortar retail right now is tremendous. And as you probably know, many of those same retailers that had .com businesses or web-based businesses are not even running those because they're not seen as essential. So the impact right now is real significant, not only from the industry from a personal standpoint, but think about the loss of state, local, and city sales tax that's being lost right now. At the same time, we're dumping trillions of dollars into the economy from the Treasury. Nothing's going in, but a lot's going out.
Again, Ken Montera is former Executive Vice President of Retail Operations at L Brands, which looks like is now going to be Bath & Body Works only, as they're selling now Victoria's Secret, going through their process. I'll ask you about that in a bit. But in terms of retail significance to gross domestic product as a percentage of the economy, Ken, how significant is it, and what does this mean with so many layoffs, or people are being told, we'll hold on to you, but we're not able to pay you right now, or maybe they've gotten these loans or what have you to be able to keep their employees on payroll, but they're not working, so we're not seeing that economic activity going on. How significant is it to the overall economy?
Well, I think it's tremendously significant if you consider the fact that it represents 6% of our GDP as a country. That's phenomenal. And I'm not even talking about going back through the supply chain to our manufacturers, to the transportation efforts that gets the product from wherever it's manufactured to our shores in the United States. So the impact across the world is significantly greater than just the $1.2 trillion that I mentioned. You know, I think the only saving grace for retailers right now from an employer labor standpoint is there's no place else to go. There's no place else to get another job right now. You know, I know Amazon is continuing to run, but they're also running with much less workforce than they used to be because even their sales are down to some degree. So the impact across the world is very significant. I do believe that once we get going again, that things are going to come back. I do believe that there's going to be pent-up demand, not only for product, but I think for the interface that has always driven the retail experience socially at the bricks and mortar store. People enjoy being out and interacting with brands, with tactile touches and purchases, and hopefully that pent-up demand will show itself once we're able to go back to work.
Ken, if you could be a little closer with your phone. Sometimes you're a little bit more distant, so if you could do that, that would be great. Again, Ken Montera joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Let's talk a little bit about the impact on supply chains right now, because this is significant, because we're talking about brands like a Bath & Body Works or a Victoria's Secret or any number of stores across the country of all different types, Best Buy, and so I guess they're probably open because of the ability to provide services to businesses, but a great many are not open because of this, and they have products that they source from around the world. This has to have a significant impact on the supply chains around the globe.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, if you think about the fact that if you just look at the apparel side of retail, right, it's such a seasonally driven product line. So what was coming across on the ocean when everything shut down was mostly meant for the coming season. So what exists in stores right now is still probably winter related or early spring related. But what's happened is when they shut those stores down overnight, they stopped the supply chain. They had to cancel as many orders that were taking place. So I think what you're looking at potentially, Jimmy, is a bottleneck of goods that were coming across at the time that could not be canceled, which probably won't be in line with the seasonality of when we open up, which could be late spring or early summer. So you've got a lot of product that's going to be in the stores that may not be as relevant. They're going to have to throw that on sale in order to move through it. And then hopefully they can get those canceled orders and manufacturing facilities up and running fast enough to meet the demands of people that are going to be looking to buy summer-based products. So it's a huge bottleneck to begin with. We're probably going to see a hell of a sale when things get open again. And then there may be an interruption of goods getting to the stores because so many orders have been canceled in the meantime.
That is an important point I hadn't even considered, the bottleneck of product that has to be delivered no matter what, but you can't put it on sale in fitting with the seasons. But I would suggest that, or think at least, Ken Montera, that maybe, just maybe, these stores that have a backlog, putting these items on sale will help incentivize people who don't have as much money right at the start, perhaps, to buy those products, at least to be more likely to buy those products than they otherwise would if they were full price, even if they're not in season.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think that's going to happen. But there is also a fashion element that's related to retail that is significant. And I think that it's although you may buy a sweater or you may buy a warm, cold winter item when things get open again, what you're going to be looking for is the freshness of spring, the newness of summer, and all those things that kind of take you out of the doldrums that we've been living in for the past 30 days and bring you into something that's going to make you happy. So don't disagree with the fact that I think there's going to probably be some economic impact on that sale and people will be coming out to buy it. But I believe that a lot of people are really motivated by the newness of item and the seasonality that occurs with the incoming summer atmosphere.
That's important, especially when we're talking about summer. I mean, that's a season when people have more specific clothing that they like to buy, for example, because it's warmer, it's hotter, so you're not going to need those winter jackets or long sleeve shirts or what have you. Now, how about the online revolution? We've already been seeing people talk about the death of brick and mortar stores. To what extent do you think the online revolution is at least helping to hold some of these companies at bay a little bit right now, with people buying products online and then having them delivered to their homes already?
Well, I think it's been significant. I mean, if you look at what's being purchased at Amazon right now, it's essential items. I ordered a Fire Stick about a week ago, and they told me that it's going to be delayed, and I probably won't get it for up to 3 weeks because they're focusing their efforts on essential items. So what you're seeing is a ramp up of needed items, not wanted items. And I think that there's a difference between someone's choice and someone's needs. And I'm hopeful that when things get turned back on again, it'll revert to not only what you need, but what you want, the things that make you happy. The new spring-based candle that you're not able to get possibly, or a fragrance that you're not able to get, or something that just makes you feel good versus things that you have to have in order to get through the next 30 or 60 days or whatever it might be in order for us to get out of this doldrum.
Again, we're talking with Ken Montera, who's former Executive Vice President of Retail Operations for L Brands. And L Brands looks like they are selling Victoria's Secret, and moving forward, Bath & Body Works will be their only company. At least that's as I understand it. What do you think about that as someone who used to be EVP of Retail Operations for the entire company of L Brands?
Yeah. I think it makes a lot of fiscal sense at this time. I mean, Victoria's Secret has struggled for the past 3 or 4 years and mightily struggled. They haven't been able to keep up with the desires and the needs of a younger female sales purchasing group. And I think that they've been left behind to some degree. And as you can see by the offering price for that brand, it is significantly less than where it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. So I think the separation of those two will be good for both of those individual companies, in that it'll allow Bath & Body Works to move forward on its own without the weight of an organization that is struggling financially within the retail markets. And hopefully the repositioning of Victoria's Secret by this investor group that's buying them will get them back in the game. But they have been a lot less relevant to young female consumers for almost 5 years now.
Very interesting. Ken Montera, I would be remiss if I didn't, since I mentioned Papa Ken before, but I think there's a specific reason why I want to bring it up. Tell the story of Papa. So my mother, as I mentioned, for over 20 years worked at Bath & Body Works. And she was just, she was a salesperson there. And she remembered when I mentioned you, when you would run for CU Region at Large, University of Colorado Region at Large in 2018. Unfortunately, unsuccessful in that endeavor. She said, "You met Papa Ken?" And it's because when she worked there, and you were EVP, I think, of Retail Operations at the time for L Brands, or maybe it was when you were salesman, EVP of National Sales for Bath & Body Works. But you had this promotional effort to motivate the teams across the country to sell product where they would get a pizza party when they were victorious, if they were the leading team in the country. Tell us a little bit about that story. And there was a video that you'd done where you were called Papa Ken in there. That's why I bring that up. But also what lesson that can tell us about motivating people in a time of crisis like we're experiencing across the country right now. Very difficult time for workers around the nation. And then also you've got the President of the United States trying to keep people going and going through their lives and not just getting down in the doldrums.
No, it's interesting. It's the old adage that out of necessity, sometimes things occur that you didn't expect. We were having a holiday season and gift sets were running a little bit sluggish. And so one of my people suggested that maybe we ought to do something really simple, low cost. The top 3 stores that sold the most amount of gift sets over a period of time, myself and some of my senior team would deliver pizza and have a pizza party with them and just sit down and talk to them, and understand what they did to be successful. So we launched that. It exploded. We had no idea that it was going to be such an interesting thing to our field sales force for us to just deliver pizzas. And so it kind of grew from there, and we continued to do it for the next 5 or 6 years, and it just got bigger and bigger. And I think what it says to me is that at the end of the day, people are connected to people. And the more you can connect the leadership of an organization with the individuals on the front line, the more that they feel they're a part of an organization, a part of the decision-making, and a part of what's going to make the organization successful. And not only did we deliver pizza, but we sat down and did roundtables with their teams. We gave them the opportunity to talk to us and tell us why they were successful, and then we shared that with the rest of the country. So just that connectivity, I think, really demonstrated that in a time of difficulty, it's more important to get closer to your front line than to stay away from your front line. And we learned that, we kept it going, and it turned into one of the most successful and desired incentive programs we ever put together. And that was for almost 35,000 people.
And clearly very memorable if it's stuck in my mom's mind and coworkers after I'd met you. So I think the lesson learned here, especially for business executives and business owners who have employees working at home, they're lucky enough to continue to work right now, is to keep that connectivity going, to foster relationships, do what you can to motivate your staff in creative ways. But Ken Montera, we've got to leave it there. Again, former Executive Vice President of Retail Operations at L Brands, as well as former VP at PepsiCo. Great to talk with you, my friend. We'll have you back, I'm sure. Thanks for your insights today, and be well and have a good weekend.
Okay.
And happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you, too. Take care, Jimmy.
Thank you. You as well. Again, Ken Montera joining us. We've got to run to a break. We are overdue for it. Roshini Rajkumar will join us next here on Jimmy at the Crossroads to offer insights on the importance of the handshake in our society and also messaging during a crisis like this. Of course, you are watching Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
To Obamacare.
Pardon me.
Pardon me. Oh, hey, you must be Freddie Mae.
Frederick, please.
Yeah, whatever. Hey, listen, I'm Bill O'Goods with OSLAP. That's Obama's Student Loan Acceleration Program, and we just passed Obamacare, right? We're about to pass another bill to nationalize student loans. It's going to be a whole federal takeover.
Excuse me, sir. Could I get you a drink?
Yes, do you have a Lady Gaga?
Of course. One moment, please.
How does this benefit SCALP, the Society of College Academics for Loan Proliferation?
Well, I'm glad you asked. More loans equals more money. That's more money for everybody. You could raise your tuition excrementally in perpetuity forever, and there's nothing they can do about it. You still got to go to school, right? You still got to get a loan. You ain't got no money. It's a win-win. Oh, and here's another thing. You can't discharge student debt by bankruptcy. You could have 3 student loans. You could go you can't declare bankruptcy on any of them. I don't care how much money you don't got.
But what about the students?
The who?
This.
Remember, my friend, here at OSLAP, we make money the old-fashioned way. We steal it from the students. This is for you.
So what you're saying is, this is a gold mine.
Indeed it is.
A gold mine.
A gold mine.
Stop! Let me tell you what's really going on with student loan debt today. You see, in 2010, President Barack Obama nationalized the student loan system, tying it to Obamacare. At that point in time, student loan debt across the country totaled $800 billion. Now, about a decade later, that number has doubled to $1.6 trillion. This is particularly because the federal government keeps giving out the loans, which has allowed colleges and universities to blithely increase their tuition without any concern. And the federal government just keeps giving out the loans because guess what? If your borrower is deeply indebted with student loan debt, you cannot discharge that debt in bankruptcy. You're stuck with it for life. That needs to change, particularly because there's no risk to the lender. That means the federal government can keep giving out loans, and also there's no risk to the colleges and universities. So they'll just keep raising tuition regardless. There really does need to be a congressional action done to address this student loan crisis in America. And at the Millennial Policy Center, we have some great extensive research on how to do this, including some bills working their way through Congress. So log on to millennialpolicycenter.org today to learn more.
Right on.
Well, it's going to be a pretty good decade.
Well, I think it'd be good.
Freddie, let's have another.
Oh, sure. Let me just.
How much saying style does Jimmy Sengenberger have left in the tank? Find out next. Final segment of Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Nathan Matoush working the Matoush Magic, producer extraordinaire. Here is we're rocking and rolling back on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Nathan, I think you have too much fun with those intros. I like it. Welcome back. Coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Great to be with you today. Here on the show, that is where politics and economics collide, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk day in and day out, saying style, here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Now, I want to thank Ken Montera. Fascinating insights from Ken into the topic of retail. Again, former executive vice president of Retail Operations at L Brands. Retail's taken a big beating right now. We'll see how they can recover from this. They're already taking a beating, particularly because of what's been happening online. So interesting dynamics at play in that regard. Phil van Doorn as well, or thanks to Phil, for joining us on the markets. Now, last but not least, I am very pleased to welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads, good friend Roshini Rajkumar, strategic communication and crisis coach to C-suite executives. She hosts Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota and Real Leaders with Roshini podcast, which can be found on your favorite podcast app. Roshini is a licensed attorney and former TV reporter called upon by media across the U.S., including yours truly, now going back, I think, 6 years, talk about leadership, crisis management, political strategy, PR blunders in sports and entertainment. And her book is Communicate That, which is now in its 3rd edition and has been read by thousands across the U.S., Canada, and Asia. Her website is ownyourwow.com. Roshini Rajkumar, welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads.
It's great to be back with you, Jimmy, and lots that you are getting into. I love how you dive into these topics from many directions.
That's one thing I think is important, especially when we're talking about a crisis like this. There are a lot of different angles to it, and there's a lot of different. There are a lot of different angles when it comes to politics and economics in general. So, my view is to zero in on just one narrow band. I'll let others do that. We should be talking about the diversity of things that impact one another.
Right. There are a lot of different angles. There are also a lot of different emotions, in both of our lifetime, and many people, even way older than we are, never experienced something like what we are going through right now as a nation. So it does mean that different kinds of industries have to come together, different disciplines have to come together and figure out a way to come up with solutions.
Speaking of coming together, Roshini, this Sunday is Easter Sunday. Today is Good Friday. Happy Good Friday and happy Easter to you. There are a lot of people across the country, millions upon millions of Americans across the country, who would normally be gathering with their families, coming together to go to Easter services, and that's not something that can happen, at least in most of the country. You talk about coming together. Unfortunately, this pandemic is getting in the way of families being able to come together on the day that is, for Christians, the single most important day of the year.
It really is. And, this whole Easter season, I'm also a Catholic. It just hasn't felt like Lent, because I can't go to Mass every Sunday, every weekend. I can't do some of the things like tonight. Normally, we'd be going to some sort of a Good Friday Mass with the family. Sunday, same thing. We would do that on Easter Sunday and then gather probably in a large group to eat and just celebrate. So it really does change up a lot of dynamics, and it takes away from things changing, right? We're really living in a space right now where every day, if we let it, could just be like Groundhog's Day. And we need to not let that happen. And so it's a combination of your own mindset. What are you doing to keep yourself invigorated? What are you doing to keep yourself calm? And how are you taking those attitudes and those feelings to your family if you have a significant other or kids or parents for that matter? We have to really look at what's happening with the older population. I have a 90-year-old father-in-law. We cannot go to his assisted living complex. We can't go inside. So this afternoon, my husband and I are going to go and watch Jeopardy with him through the window on the phone. So that is how we'll connect. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes you sad, but at least we can do that.
I think that's fantastic. And for us, I mean, we're pretty much the only members of our family here in Colorado. I got a couple cousins who live up in Fort Collins, but basically it's just the 5 of us, my parents, brother, sister, and I, and we would always go to 11 o'clock Mass on Sunday, and then we'd go home and we would take pictures. I'm the one who always likes to dress up with a suit and tie. My dad will dress up with no tie, but looking dapper, and sister, mother looking great, brother dressed. And so we have these traditions in that regard. We'll come back, we'll take pictures in our outfits, what we're wearing for the day and everything. And then finally we could take them off, and then just relax and enjoy each other's company. And I don't know how Sunday is going to go, what's going to happen with that, but the bottom line is that things are very different. And so a big question that I think a lot of Americans are asking themselves, probably most if not all Americans, how do we deal with this temporary reality that we're living in? How do we manage through it to be able to stay connected with others, with our family, with our friends? You found a very creative way to do it with the Jeopardy game, important member of your family to visit. What do you think Americans should be keeping in mind this holiday in that regard?
Still try to find those things that are special for you. So I will be broadcasting my radio show this Sunday from 12 to 3 Central Time, broadcasting right here from the home office, home studio, and my studio coordinator will be back at the station. But it's important, and I want to remind my listeners on Sunday of this too. It's important that we don't think we need to take away from some of the traditions. So if you use the fine china at those special meals, even if your gathering is smaller this year, still pull out the fine china. It's still a holiday. It's still a celebration. Maybe for those people that aren't going to be able to be with you, maybe you put a picture of them at their spot at the table so you can still sort of look at them, talk to them, and feel like they're with you. So what are the things you can do to still make Easter weekend, Easter Sunday, for some people it's Passover? What are some things you can do to still be with your own traditions and not feel like you have to completely overlook them because we are living in a very crazy time right now?
Roshini Rajkumar, our guest, strategic communication and crisis coach, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Let's just shift gears to another tradition that has been significant in the United States for a few centuries now, and that is the handshake. You and I talked about this last Saturday night on my 710 KNUS Denver radio show, and then I wrote a column for Colorado Politics, where I'm a columnist here in Colorado, where I'm broadcasting from, about this exact issue. The title of that piece was "Let's All Shake on It After It's No Longer a Crime in Colorado," because in Colorado, it is a crime right now to shake hands, which is, I think, a ridiculous absurdity.
That is ridiculous. I cannot believe it.
Nevertheless, it is the case. Now, Dr. Fauci, and I want to play this clip we have on Cut 6 where he was asked a follow-up about this. But Dr. Fauci on Wednesday, interestingly enough, said that in an interview with Wall Street Journal podcast that he thinks we shouldn't shake hands ever again. Now, this echoes sentiments expressed a few times in the past few weeks by President Trump, which is what prompted my piece on Sunday and my decision to talk about this on Saturday's show and now here again, because I'm a big believer in the significance of the handshake. I talked about it earlier in this show. But here's Dr. Fauci being asked about it in a follow-up way on CBS's This Morning yesterday.
No, I did it almost a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not really. There was a bit of reality to that. What I really meant is that we really now need to be aware of, because it has hit us smack in the face, that respiratory infections, particularly brand new, ominous respiratory infections like we're going through right now, are clearly spread very much not only by droplets, but by people touching their face, shaking hands. And that's the reason why we talk about washing hands so often. I don't think in reality that we're going to all of a sudden never again shake hands. But I think I threw that out there to get people to start thinking much more about personal hygiene and the way that impacts the spread of a really deadly infection like we're going through right now.
So thankfully, Dr. Fauci sort of backpedaling or saying, yeah, I don't think this is really realistic, that this likely is to happen. But I learned about the value of, and especially how to do a good handshake when I was a kid from my dad. And then I put that to use starting at the ripe old age of 13 when I first got involved in politics in Colorado, and really started to learn how significant a handshake can be in telling how a person is in social interactions, the firmness of their handshake as opposed to a fish, as my dad would call it. Also, when it comes to looking someone in the eye, you can tell a lot about a person by how they look at you in the eye or how they don't look at you in the eye during a handshake. When you're doing job interviews, research shows that you're more likely to get a job if you have a good handshake than if you don't. And then also an interesting paper, 2012, for the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience, authors concluded that, quote, a handshake preceding a social interaction enhanced the positive impact of approach and diminished the negative impact of avoidance behavior on the evolution of social interaction, which is just a very fascinating conclusion from this paper. And of course, let's just shake on it, and then I trust that you will abide by your word. So Roshini Rajkumar, what do you make of the handshake in this discussion? Maybe we should get rid of it after the pandemic has passed.
I completely disagree with Dr. Fauci. I know Fauci's having really his moment right now. What I wish he would have said is, folks, this is our opportunity to learn and be better at our own personal hygiene. So the headline I would have preferred would be something like, you got to wash your hands more, right? Before you go to events, after you've been around a lot of people, or even right away, not long after the handshake. So if we could just teach all levels of people better personal hygiene, that is the better health message that I wish could come out of this. When Dr. Fauci is he's got such a platform right now, not the kill the handshake. The handshake is just, it's going to be a perennial symbolic gesture that brings so many people together and cuts through a lot of different boundaries and lines. And as you pointed out, you do a quick assessment of someone with their eyes, with their body language, just through that ability to shake their hand.
Yeah, I learned that value, as I said, as a teenager just getting involved in politics. Thankfully, my dad taught me how to do it, what not to do in a handshake, and I've gotten compliments from people on it in the past, which I think, especially when I was younger, which is pretty formative because it helps you to be better when you're going out into the professional world. I agree with you. The hygiene aspect, that's what's been so striking to me about all the shortages at stores. Is it's like, did people suddenly realize that you should wash your hands even going after going to the restroom? Because
I know. People are disgusting sometimes, Jimmy. Haven't you been in even private bathrooms, like when you're in buildings of not like out in the big public, but maybe a business building, and you're in a bathroom, you're in a restroom, different strangers, and you almost go overboard to make sure people know you're washing your own hands. And when I see people walking out of restaurant bathrooms or business building bathrooms without washing their hands, it just grosses me out. So hopefully this whole pandemic will let all of us take a look at our personal hygiene habits. We will eventually go back to flying on airplanes. Let's be a little more hygienic on airplanes. Let's clean up after ourselves. Let's clean up after our kids. All of these things could be some lessons that I want to see on the other side, but I will never want to see the death of the handshake.
Me neither. Roshini Rajkumar, guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, host of Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota and the Real Leaders with Roshini podcast. Roshini, let's shift over to specifically your strategic communication and crisis coach hat. I mean, you've talked and trained and helped a lot of executives work through crisis situations. And I'm wondering how you think now the Trump administration, and President Trump in particular, have been handling the messaging of all this. Because now we're seeing every day for weeks, the President of the United States has been holding these coronavirus press briefings, and there are some in the media who think that the media should no longer cover these briefings at all. What do you make of how he's messaging it, and then also the idea of not carrying briefings of the President of the United States?
What we do know about President Donald Trump is that he comes from kind of part of his world is the TV world. He likes being on stage. And when he gets his message to where he feels comfortable with it, he loves that. And he can't do rallies anymore. So this kind of daily be in front of the American people, be on TV, multiple times a week, I think that really feeds his ego. I do not think it's a good idea. It gets to the point of kind of the boy who cries wolf. I would much rather he do at most a weekly briefing, or as is normally the case with someone as in high of a position as the President of the United States, you just do a briefing when it's really needed. because then it makes it special, it makes it important, it makes it interesting. Now, a lot of governors are doing daily briefings, including the governor of Minnesota. I think he's trying to wind off his weekend briefings, but I think that's excessive too, because what it does, it takes the already kind of depleted media resources. You're asking media to also work from home and to stay 6 feet apart. Why put them in front of you, or why make them have to figure out how to cover you 7 days a week or 5 days a week? So I don't think it's smart. I would give him 50-50 on how he's messaging. I would certainly not give him a 10 on the messaging. And he really needs to keep his facts and figures straight before he decides to take it in a public way to the American people.
Now, how about the combativeness with the media? You do have some people in the media who are intentionally being antagonistic, but President Trump also likes to throw shade, so shall we say, at the media a good deal because they get under his skin. They do a lot of things going after him, and I think he also likes the tussle. He finds it fun and he finds it entertaining for viewers. But what do you make of that? Because I do think that if he's doing it every day, these press conferences, and he's getting into spats with the media. I mean, the Wall Street Journal already said this is basically a boring thing for you to keep doing.
Yeah, well, you and I have talked now for many years, definitely since Donald Trump became president. You know that I do not feel he is on any given day very presidential. So tussling with the media does not help his presidential image status. Now, according to our Constitution, which you and I both love, it's never been the job of the media, of the Fourth Estate, to side with politicians or try to make them look good. Do I believe they need to be antagonistic? No. Look, I'm a former TV news reporter, and I never tried to just purposely, for my own ego, try to make someone I was interviewing look bad. But it is actually the media's job, reporters' job, to question government, from local to state to federal authorities, and protect the rest of us in that way because they've got the pulpit to do it. So I'm never going to criticize media for questioning the president or your governor or senators or mayors, because now they are all being put into positions where they're making very big executive orders and unilateral orders, which frankly, I have some questions with civil liberties on many of these orders, but if that's maybe another show. But at the end of the day, if we are being asked to do these things that are taking our civil liberties away, then by all means should the media be questioning the people who are ordering us to do that. I don't want the president to tussle with the media. I don't think the media should be just badgering him, but they do need to keep asking questions.
Now, I actually want to take a couple minutes or final minutes to go on to the civil liberties question, because I mentioned and quoted Dr. Fauci a little bit ago talking about the idea of certificates of immunity to coronavirus. When asked on CNN about this earlier today, he said, it's possible, saying that he could imagine a time when people would carry this kind of identification. Quote, "It's one of those things that we talk about when we want to make sure that we know who the vulnerable people are and not. This is something that's being discussed. I think it might actually have some merit under certain circumstances." That was earlier on CNN. You are a licensed attorney still in addition to all your consulting work and everything. What do you make of that from a legal standpoint, just on the civil liberties question? I don't like the idea of having to carry around some type of identification that verifies that you're okay to go out and about. That doesn't scream America to me.
Jimmy, it smacks in the face of everything that we believe are our American freedoms. I think it would be terrible if we had to carry around some kind of ID like that. We are already sort of living in that 1984 world that George Orwell predicted many, many years before the year 1984. We're living in that, and you know that I am nonpartisan, but I am about the Constitution and I am about civil liberties. And this is, in my lifetime, this is the worst attack on civil liberties that we've had. The problem is that most Americans aren't viewing it that way, because it's behind the guise of protecting our health and preventing death. I don't want people to die. I don't want this contagion to kill thousands and thousands of people. But we have to remember what this country was built upon, and it requires all of us to remember what that means. But but especially the people in position to make law and policy.
One thing that always comes to mind when we're talking about civil liberties being given up for a crisis is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The new Emperor Palpatine comes out there and says that he's bringing about the first galactic empire for a safe and secure society. And then Senator Padme Amidala says, so this is how liberty dies, to thunderous applause, as the senators are going crazy. Hundreds of senators who are applauding very vigorously as the new Emperor Palpatine is saying that. I think it's such an important point that we cannot lose who we are as a people. And I have to say, Roshini, as a final point for your response, I'm losing a little bit of faith in Dr. Fauci right now, because I think he has been stressing the numbers, the projections that are not meeting up even close. Now, 60,000 deaths of Americans because of this virus is tragic, and it's horrific. But thankfully, it's a lot better than 400,000, which is the number I first heard him talking about.
Right.
He's also talking about getting rid of handshakes and now having people go around with certificates of immunity. He's losing me here.
Well, he's losing me too, because once we start getting to where we can find multiple Saturday Night Live skits in a week of daily press conferences, we're in a bad place, right? Because then you've just taken away the freedom of millions of Americans who are not able to do their thing, to make a living. Look, I'm a small business owner, Jimmy. Today I was on the phone with my baker looking into the PPP loans. I don't want my business to collapse because of this. It can't go on. And if it goes on because the science types and the health officials were keeping true numbers from us and we're not being transparent, then shame on them and shame on the media for not asking the right questions and challenging these officials sometimes. That's what I would like to see.
Roshini Rajkumar, communications coach, strategist. Check out her website, ownyourwow.com, where you can also find her book, Communicate That. Always enjoy a good conversation with you, Roshini. Happy Easter to you, and thanks so much for taking the time today.
You too, Jimmy, and congrats. The graphics are really looking nice.
Thank you very much. We will have you back soon, I am sure. Roshini Rajkumar, one of our favorite guests to have on the airwaves or the internet, however it may be, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. You know, just a final word here as we wrap up this edition of the show. Good Friday does feel like a Good Friday to me. The 10th of April, we've got Easter coming up on Sunday. Our Jewish brothers and sisters have been celebrating Passover. Happy Passover, happy Easter, one and all. We need to keep some perspective here that this is an important struggle for us to get through, but we will get through it. And moreover, we must enjoy to the best of our abilities communication with family, especially on this holiday weekend, because this is a time where we'd be going out to churches, enjoying family, having celebrations and services. And as Roshini said, we need to keep the greatest semblance of that as we possibly can. So happy Easter, happy Passover. This is a great country. This is the greatest country on earth. We must not also lose our civil liberties, because as Roshini and I talked about, that is the essence of what it means to be an American, because we are a free society. So that is it for us today. Thanks to all of our guests. Thanks to Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush Magic, producer extraordinaire today. And of course, to the Washington Examiner, our partners here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. If you're in the Denver metro area in Colorado, please tune in to the Jimmy Sengenberger Show tomorrow, 5 to 8 p.m. Rick French will be with us. We had a great conversation with him on this show the other day. You can also listen online, 5 to 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 710knus.com. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Enjoy the holiday as best you can. And as always, may God bless America.